I'm back live streaming, as you can see today, and I'm going to be going through a mastering session on a track that I'm finishing this week. And before I did that, actually, I want to just talk a little bit. I thought actually it'd be good on the live streams to maybe talk about some more broader things other than just the technical side of things. And this week I've been go back to my I'll open it up, my Trello organization platform that I use to organize all my projects. So I've had some tracks that started out as live stream jams, little ideas that I was doing. And basically in this column here is kind of like the stuff that I'm trying to get ready to release. And this is the stuff which is ready to release, basically. And these two, which is not going to be called that, Soulful Thang Thursday. I think I'm going to call it STT because I'm so attached to the name, even though it's beyond dreadful. So I might just call it STT. And I Miss You. These two have just been hanging around for so long. I looked at this and I started these two in June on a live stream, actually just messing around. And this one's Something Deep Inside that I'm going to be mastering today. Also, let's see when I started. This actually started as an edit, believe it or not, of something else. Look how many versions there are. Well, so this one started in November the 8th, 2019. So that was over a year ago I started this track, but I mean, it's completely different now, and I haven't been working on it in that all that time. It's just been very sporadic, but these tracks have been hanging around for a long time, and I was getting really sick of them, and I've got so many ideas that I need to finish. Look, at these are all ones that I've come up with in the last kind of couple of weeks. These are all the ones that I've got. All these ones that are bookmarked are ones that I want to take forward and finish. So I've got so many tracks. These are not like just track names or ideas. These are like pieces of music that need to be finished, right? So there's a lot of music in there. So the problem I have is that this part of the process is taking too long, and I'm not getting enough of these tracks through this machine, basically. And what I realized this week, so this week I basically said, right, I'm going to finish this track, and this track at the very least this week, and hopefully have a really good amount of time to work on this one and maybe some of this one as well. So I've finished these two, and this is what I'm going to finish today. And what I realized in doing that is actually, I mean, it sounds kind of obvious, but it's the finishing of music which is the feeling that I I love the most about what I do in making music. I love the craft of it. I love the process, and just trying to create the best music you can. But it's actually just the taking action, the finishing, and the releasing of music, which is the part which gives you the most pleasure. And it just made me think. I'm I'm going to try to keep up with a release schedule of maybe a track a week next year. That's my plan, or maybe a track every 2 weeks. I'm not exactly sure yet because it's going to be a busy year next year. But that is what I want to try and do. So I want to try and sit down and think of a way of how would I keep up with that release schedule and not have the quality of music drop, because it's been a real wake-up call this week in finishing 3 tracks. I need to have that feeling more often rather than kind of knocking tracks around. I mean, the good thing about this is that you work on multiple tracks at the same time, which is great because you do get a lot more finished than you would do otherwise. And having 3 tracks finished in a week sounds great, but obviously they've been hanging around for a long time. And a lot of these tracks in here are really quite far developed, but I've had to push them back in because I didn't have enough time to work on them. So some of these will be finished fairly quickly. But I need to be getting these tracks finished quicker. So I'm going to try and sit down and think of what we're doing. And I think actually it's a really good thing for music producer to do generally, is think of what's holding me back, where am I getting in my own way, where am I overthinking things, where am I overcomplicating things, and how can the process be oversimplified, maybe things outsourced, to enable you to create the most content you can, because we live in a world where you need to be constantly in people's minds, and constantly have content coming out. So yeah, that was just something I wanted to start with. Anyway, so the main focus of today's live stream is going to be mastering, and I'm going to be mastering this track here, which is a new Get To Know track. It should actually say featuring Andre Espol because it's got Andre on the vocals. Let me just give some props to Andre. So check him out. Great vocalist. Check him out on his Spotify here. He's got loads of really good tracks. Big up Andre. Yes, it's a track we've been working on. So yeah, he's got loads of music up on here. Some stuff we've done together in the past as well. Yeah, so this is a kind of a it's kind of a disco house kind of start. It's got a bit of a yacht rock kind of vibe to it as well. But yeah, so we're going to be mastering it today. So let's just have a little blast of the track, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, so you get a picture, little green tea refill going on there. So yes, so let's get on to a mastering session. So the first thing to look at with this, so this is actually my mastering template. So I do a lot of mastering for CRT Records. I'm their in-house mastering engineer. So I have a kind of basic set of tools that I like to use that I adapt depending on what type of music it is and what the track needs. So we'll have a look at what I'm going to use from here. So this is obviously quite a kind of quite an old school sounding kind of house kind of vibe. It's got a bit of a vintage feel to it. It's got lots of kind of vinyl noise in there and stuff like that. So yeah, so we're trying to bring that out and keep it in our context. Now this is probably the most useful tool. This might be the most useful plugin, and actually the plugin that's taught me more than any other plugin that I own. Because what it is a frequency density meter. So rather than saying, right, this is how many frequencies are there, it's almost like the quality of those frequencies and the density of those frequencies. And what it is compared with loads of great sounding masters from within different categories, so like bass heavy, but you can also make your own by analyzing folders of tracks. And I've done that with Dr. Packer, who I generally find music sounds good when I've played it out. I've got some ones from my freelance mastering, tech house kind of ones, and I've got a Purple Disco Machine preset as well. And what I've done is I've chopped out all the drops, or the kind of like not the breakdowns, the groove sections of Purple Disco Machine tracks, and I've analysed those to get kind of an idea of where his frequencies dense, and I use that as a comparison as well as the Dr. Packer one, and also just the bass heavy preset as well. I find it really, really useful because it can show you areas of your mix that could be improved and areas that are going to be a problem. So basically you can think of this plugin as being like, this is your translation meter. How well is your mix going to translate to different listening environments? That is what it is. If you get the mix to look good in here, obviously, as long as it sounds good as a track. But if it looks good in here, then generally it's going to translate well across multiple different listening environments. So if you get your track up and you notice the bass is up here, you know, the low mids are down here, the trebles up here, then the chances are your room is cheating on you. It's lying to you, basically, because if it sounds great in your speakers, but that's what the meters are telling you here, then the chances are when you take it into different listening environments, you're going to be in for a nasty surprise. So you find if it works within these parameters, obviously using either presets or if you analyze great tracks from your genre, if it looks good within there, what I find is when I play it on different systems, it's going to translate really, really well. And there's funny, I heard someone else say this, but there's kind of a misconception around that club sound systems, everything sounds great on a club sound system when it's really loud, and it's actually the complete opposite, which is true. If there's any problems within the mix down or in the production, you can think of the club sound system as being like a microscope, so basically everything's going to be magnified. So yeah, it's like a magnifying glass. So basically any problems that you've got are going to be magnified by the size of the sound system. So if there's muddiness or harsh top end or whatever, put it on a club sound system, it's going to sound 1,000 times worse. So yeah, don't be thinking that a club sound system is going to save you. So this, I'm going to use this for a reference, basically, to give me some ideas on maybe some EQ curves and stuff like that. So I want to say hi to Sagnik. I hope I'm saying that right. Thanks for joining, mate. I hope you're good. He's been doing some of the recent artwork I've done on my tracks. So big up. Thanks for that. And actually, I should say that I've got a new VIP remix of my track that came out on Boogie Angst. Love Taught Me. So if you go across to Get to Know SoundCloud page, there's a brand new club kind of VIP, even though there's no clubs open, which is down as a free download. So yeah, just jump across and have check that out if you haven't already. Cool. Okay, so let's dive in. So let's play the kind of drop section, and let me just see how we're looking in terms of this comparison. So we have kind of two views here. We have a broad view and a fine view. Now, there's obviously going to be differences in the frequency spectrum because, I'm not producing, it's not exactly the same track as the Purple Disco Machine track. So there's going to be variation, of course. And I'm sure if you put a Purple Disco Machine track in and analyzed it against all the Purple Disco Machine tracks, there would also be differences in there. So I'm not looking for it to be identical, but it can give you areas to experiment with when it comes to EQing. Now, I'm going to bring up Pro Q3, which is generally where I go for mastering, but I do like using the passive EQ for Native Instruments as well, so I might jump across with that too. But let me just do a little have a look at some EQ options with this meter in mind as well. So adding in just a little roll off on the very low frequencies can be a good way of just taking away some frequencies that you can't really hear, and it's going to just tighten things up. But be aware that, let's say the kick drum is tuned generally around the kind of 50 hertz to 80 hertz. Let's say 40 to 80 hertz, the fundamental of the kick. Well, often there's a subharmonic on the kick drum. So if it was 50 hertz, the subharmonic would be 25. So about there. So I don't generally want to cut up into that area because you'll start taking away subharmonics that are present, and that can just take away a little bit of warmth and fatness and power by taking that away. So I generally keep these low cuts really, really low, and because remember that the frequency the low cut is at is not the frequency it's actually cutting away. It starts cutting away here, so we're just below that 25 kind of area. But a little cut there can be quite good just to tidy things up a little bit on that low end. And similarly on the high as well, just taking away some of those really, really, really high frequencies can be good, just to basically take away some kind of harsh kind of high end, let's say. So I'll bring it up a little bit. So remember, this is kind of where it's starting, this roll off. I don't like to be too steep with these curves, like steep curves and brick walls and stuff are not musical really. So I like to keep things nice and musical. Okay, so we can basically try out an approach which is, I've heard described as feathering, which is where you kind of create little pockets where you boost and pockets where you cut, just to make things a little bit more balanced. So we've got a little build up here, I'd say. You can see there's a little bit of a dip there. Just taking away frequencies can be fine, but often just having little boosts and little cuts in complementary areas, so kind of doing a cut and a boost either side, is more effective than just doing a cut on its own. Just a little bit more balanced, a little bit more muddy. Just focus on that bass. So with this out, I feel like we have a bit of a weird roominess, kind of boxiness to the bass. We're just a little bit more open with that out, I'd say. Now, there seems to be a little bit of a hole around the kind of 6K kind of area. So let's just have a look at that. Okay, let's try this in and out. So this little bypass here is kind of a bypass, which means that we don't affect the playback timing, because linear phase means we get a delay when we bypass it if we did it from up here. So this way we can basically bypass Pro Keys 3 without hearing any difference in time, which can be a little bit distracting. So let's try it out and in. Yeah, so definitely less boxy sounding for me with that in. Now, another approach we could go for is using a plugin which I really, really like, which is the Passive EQ, which is based on a Massive Passive, which is a Manley EQ. So let me just get this Pro Keys 3 up and let's just look at what we did here and see if we can try something a little bit similar with the Massive Passive, the Passive EQ. Okay, we'll try the low cut and we'll try the high cut. That's a little bit inflexible in a way. So then we did a kind of 400 cut, so we can put these onto cut. Well, we got 390, we'll turn that up a little bit. Then we had a 200 boost. So we've got fixed points here, which can be cool, you know, because sometimes they're kind of set to areas that sound good. And then we're running out a little bit of options here, but we could do, where is this one? 1.5 little cut. And then we could do a boost around, where did I say it was, like 7? We'll try 8. Let's see what sounds better. This is always interesting to do. Okay. Oh, it's a tough one. There's something about this that I really like, but it's I've maybe just gone a little bit too hard on the amounts. I often find with a kind of analog modeled component, you can be a little bit more heavy-handed, and it still sounds good, but maybe that's a little bit too extreme. Okay, so this was on shelf. I'm going to try it on bell and see if that makes a difference. It's really brightened things up quite a lot. I wonder what happens if we use Soothe 2 just to try and get rid of a little bit of harshness from those cymbals. Mastering. This is a great tool for doing this. Master, let's try that. Yeah, that's really nice. So let's just try and bring these in and out. It's a bit muddy sounding, more balanced but a little bit less harsh. To me, that feels really listenable. That makes sense with those tools in there. It's more balanced, which means we've lost a bit of that mud in the low mids. But that soothe has allowed it to be just a bit more listenable, a little bit less harsh. Now, this is the Kramer tape from Waves. This is a great tape saturation plugin. So let's see what this gives us. This usually gathers things up and brings them out of the speaker. Yeah, that's nice. It's almost brightening up a little bit, so I might just try bringing the soothe after it. Wanted to refine that so it's a little bit kind of broader. Okay, so let's have a look at some other things we can do here. So compression. obviously helps contain things, helps clamp on transients, but the most important thing it does in mastering is help you enhance the 3D space. And why does it do that? Because it affects volume, and we use volume to perceive how close something is to us or how far away it is. So let's try and do that with this compressor. Now this is a really cool tool, Music Math. Put in the tempo, which is 120. Yep. And it tells you all the values that you can use for release times and delay times and pre-delays, in relation to your BPM. So I usually find a 16th note is good for this, which is 125 milliseconds. So let's put a release time of 125. Let's make the compressor fairly hard knee, so it's quite responsive. And let's see what it gives us. Now, I should say that I've got this set up as a preset, so I don't have to keep on doing this, because I do this on so many tracks that it makes sense just to have it auto-loading. So I've got like the gain set up correctly and the attack time at 30 milliseconds. So we're looking for about a dB of gain reduction, I'd say. So this compressor is just amazing. It's by far and away my favorite compressor. And I'd say if you wanted to buy one set of plugins to kind of pimp your studio out, then FabFilter every single time, because like this compressor's got all these different settings in it that you can try. I've never even tried the mastering setting on a master. I always have it on clean for a master, but all these different settings. So on this track, I actually did bus compression on the whole track, and I used Pro C2, which normally I'd use like the SSL plugin or something like that, but I tried it out just using the different modes on different submixes or buses, and it just sounded amazing. It's got quite a low CPU load. It's just a killer compressor. It really is. It's the best. So I've got this to not respond so much to the bass, because otherwise it kind of gums it up a little bit. So I find it's a little bit tighter, a bit more responsive with not as much bass there. So just focus on when I take it out, everything feels like it's more on one level. When I bring it in, you should hear a bit more front back depth. So it just opens it up a little bit. It's amazing. Now this is the Varicomp, which I use a lot. This is like a Manley Varimu compressor, but I think this track's too bright, and I'm not going to use it on this one because I think it will make it sound a bit too harsh. This is just, I use this sometimes to make things sound a bit warmer, which might work on here actually, because it's maybe a little bit too harsh sounding. But let's just see what it's like. This is, don't know what it's based on, but it's some kind of old channel strip, which is a little bit warm sounding. So let's see what it does. Nope, doesn't do anything that sounds good. This is a Neve preamp. Let's try this on there. No, not doing anything I like. Now, a lot of these sounds have been run through my Neve clone that I've got under the table here, so it's already got a lot of like Neve kind of sound on the individual sound. So I don't know if that's something which we really need to add. This is NLS Bus. Now this is another kind of channel strip style plugin. We've got a SSL setting, an EMI setting, and a Neve setting. Let's just see what this gives us. Yeah, that makes it sound a little bit more open as well. I think that the SSL setting, I like that. Cool. Okay, so next thing we can do is add in some parallel compression if we want to. Now I've got this set up as a preset. This is like a mastering preset where we've got a really low threshold, really light ratio, and it's just basically going to be squashing the hell out of the track. And I'm going to bring that back in. So it's kind of like an RMS, a fatness kind of control, if you like. So let me demonstrate. So the more we bring this in, the fatter we're going to be making things. So obviously I was pushing it to be a little bit too extreme there, but let's mute it and you'll hear the difference. So it's kind of adding a lot of body and volume. Now what we can do is actually fine tune. Let's put this onto linear phase. We can fine tune this actually so we don't have maybe like too much harshness going in there and dialing that in. So I think often, I just realised I've got this starting in the wrong place. Often you can think of parallel chains as being hype. It's your kind of hype control. So you hear when I bring that in, it's just everything's more hyped. So if you want more hype, then you use your parallels to bring that out. Okay, so the next tool which I can use, this is we're getting into kind of the loudness territory here. It's like how can we get more loudness out? MV2. What's that stand for? I can't remember. Max volume, I think. So this is a low level compressor. So low level brings up sounds below the threshold. Voodoo, kind of. So it's like by doing compression, we're turning down the peaks. We're doing parallel compression, bringing up really like the low level stuff as well. And this one but this is still like a compressing everything above the threshold. This is bringing up things below the threshold. So it's kind of like it's an upwards compressor. So it compresses the dynamic range by bringing up the lowest level sounds. And in mastering, by approaching it from those different directions, you can get quite a lot of volume out. It's quite good. So let's try that. Also brings out quite a lot of detail as well, but it can be a bit harsh. You've got to be careful. Also, I should be gain matching it. Okay, I like that. So let's have a look at Ozone Imager. So I don't tend to work in this area unless there's a problem. So if it's someone else's master and it's too mono, too stereo, then I might work in the middle area. But I was told a long time ago by somebody who's who taught me a lot of stuff, that actually you're best off spreading the kind of environmental energy, the kind of really sizzly top end, which doesn't really have any kind of melodic information. It doesn't have any fundamental frequencies in there. Doesn't have any like important overtones in the sound. It's more like just a collection of frequencies from different sounds that aren't necessarily essential. You could probably roll off everything above 10k on a track and still have a hit. I think it's Dave Pensado that said that. Depending on what kind of genre it is, so that this area is right for spreading. But say if we had a piano sound and it has its fundamentals down here and it has its overtones up here, and we start spreading up here, you get to a point where half the piano is spread and half the piano is not spread, and it can be a little bit discombobulating. Is that the word? But it can basically mess around with things. So generally I spread above 10k, and then sometimes like to try just making the low frequencies below kind of 80 completely mono, which they usually are anyway, because I'm kind of quite careful about that. So let's see what that gives us. Yeah, I think it just subtly opens it out and helps it kind of escape the speakers a little tiny bit, which I think is good. Now, something I just wanted to try is using another amazing FabFilter plugin, which is the Pro MB. And let me just get up the multimeter. So I just wanted to try a little bit of compression on this low mid kind of area. Okay, and I'm going to try a little expansion of this area here. Okay, yeah, I think this is doing something good. Let's try another expansion to bring out a little bit of lows. Often it's a good idea, as I said before, to to kind of cut an area and then boost around it. This is basically a multi-band compressor, but it's kind of approaching it as more of an EQ angle. Feels a little bit more balanced like that. Okay, so this is quite a crazy plugin. It's called Gullfoss, and it's basically like a kind of real time. It's basically like the opposite end of this plugin. So this plugin is telling you where is your track in terms of frequencies and frequency density and balance, and this is trying to get it to be more balanced and more looking better in here, more balanced in here. So this is kind of allows you to achieve a more balanced mix basically by real time. It's kind of like what I just did with the Pro MB in a way. It's kind of real time trying to balance frequencies subtly. I usually take it away from the low frequencies, but let's try bringing it back into the lows. So let's see what this does. I usually find it makes things sound a bit more separate. Sorry, one sec. Oh, uses a lot of CPU, this one. Just makes it sound less cluttered. It's crazy. Really good. So next up, we're going to do a little bit of clipping, which is going to just rein in some of the transients before we go to our master limiter. So it's just holding things in place. Now, the way I did this, I had these two linked. So I'm basically bringing down the threshold as I bring down the ceiling. So we're not adding any volume. It's just clipping the top of the waveform essentially. So it's just shaving off the peaks. Okay, so this is our final limiter. Now I'm running out of CPU here, which is extremely annoying. But what I might try doing is, well, let's see how we get on. So usually I often use a master assistant because what it does is it sets up a dynamic EQ to analyze the track and work out how it can make the limiter as transparent as it can possibly be. So I put it on CD, which is streaming's a lower level. This is going to be a kind of a DJ master. You can have modern or vintage. I'll keep it on modern. And then if I play the track, it's going to analyze it and it's going to try and work out how it can either EQ the track if there's any EQ problems, compress it if there's compression issues or dynamic range issues, and also just basically have like a dynamic EQ which rides the track to make sure that the limiter at the end doesn't have as much work to do. Yeah, I had a feeling it's going to do that. So what I might have to do is just take off Gullfoss for now. Let's try it again and see how we get on. Okay, so let's try another angle. So what I can do is, once we finish this live stream, I can basically put these back in and do it, just bounce it to get it on there. But I'm going to replace the passive EQ with Pro EQ 3, and hopefully that will be a little bit less CPU. let's see. Let me take this off. I'm not sure if bypass plugins use CPU, but let's try. No. Okay, so what I'm going to have to do is not use the Master Assistant, and instead I will do the limiting myself. So I'm going to put it onto I'll put it onto modern because the transient setting uses a lot of CPU. So this is where we're getting the track up to the right level. So I'll put true peak on, put the ceiling to minus 0.3, and then I'm going to bring down the threshold to get a decent level coming in. Let's see if we can do this with the other plugins in. No. Okay. So I need to turn down my level to compensate. I've actually mixed this track a little bit low in level. I kind of, as I said, I really wanted to finish a load of music this week. So normally I'm a little bit more diligent with my mixing to basically make sure I'm hitting kind of -6, but I've mixed this one low level for some reason. But it's fine because everything is okay upstream, and I can actually just boost the input coming in if I need to. They just love it on the live stream when you run out of CPU. It's great. Great TV. Great live streaming. So we're pretty loud for the genre. It's pretty up there. I've analysed a lot of kind of disco house kind of vibe music. A lot of the producers, and I find Yuksek and Purple Disco Machine are the loudest I've kind of found. Yuksek being the loudest. He's really loud, but this is definitely competitive. And I often find that regardless of whether you want the track to be that loud or not, the loudness is almost like a quality control, because if you can't get the track really loud, often there's something wrong with the production. Well, not something wrong, but there's an issue with the production, which means you can't get it that loud. Like there's too much bass, or usually there's too much bass, or there's just not enough inherent loudness in the sound choices. So often, even if you don't want to go that loud and you think that's a bit crunchy or a bit too kind of squashed, just knowing you can get there without it falling apart is quite good, just to check. Although you don't want to check too early in the process, because that can lead you down a rabbit hole of trying to jump to the end point and when you haven't finished all the bits that need to be done in between. But I usually like to slap a limiter on quite early on in the process and just see how loud I can get it, because it tells me if I can't get it very loud at all, it's usually a reason for that. Like there's something which is hitting the limiter too quickly, which means you're getting distortion. And not every type of track I make or people make generally is going to be able to get to the same level. If it's more of like a band kind of vibe, then it's not going to be hitting the limiter in the same way. But a 4/4 kind of club track, often you should be able to have the ability to get it up to be as loud as that, really. And if you notice on this limiter, actually, I'm not doing very much limiting at all. Because that's doing too much. This is the clipper. We don't really doing that much. Okay, cool. So thanks Logic for the system overloads. This is I've got a 2010 Mac Pro in my studio, and it's an absolute beast, or it was an absolute beast, and it still is really. 64 gig of RAM, 12 cores. It's a really powerful computer, but it's getting to the point where the newer plugins just max it out. I mean, look at this. There's not that many plugins in here, but some of the ones like this passive EQ, the Goldfoss, Ozone, it just, I mean, I think maybe Ozone, they designed it so it's so CPU intensive that you only really have the ability to use Ozone. Maybe that was try and stop using other plugins. I don't know, but I was even looking at the new Mac Minis, the M1 chip Mac Minis, and they're like much more powerful than this Mac Pro from 2010. That's a Mac Mini. So once the technology catches up with the M1 chip, so once all the plugins are available, that's going to be a massive game changer. Because if you get, the top spec laptop or top spec Mac Mini, even with these new M1 chips, or top spec iMac, for not having to fork out $5,500 or however much the new Mac Pros are, you're going to get a seriously powerful computer for under £1,000 in the case of a Mac Mini. And yeah, it's pretty good, really. So that is going to be that, because obviously we're running out of CPU, and I'm just going to tweak this and just try and bring in these plugins that I've had to bypass, and then run off a master of this. I hope you found that interesting. So yeah, some of the things we covered obviously was trying out the different EQs. I talked about this feathering technique where you can just take down little areas of too much density and boost around them just to get a little bit of a extra balance into the track. And we did the same on the passive EQ, which is a Manley Massive Passive. We did a bit of tape saturation. We did Soothe 2 to basically just try and make it a bit more listenable on the high end. We did Pro MB just to balance things out a little bit more. What's this? We did a bit of compression just to increase the front back perspective. NLS Bus just to create that kind of analog mixing console vibe. What's this? That is an imager, which isn't doing anything. We did a bit of parallel compression. I rolled off some of the tops just into that, so it wasn't too harsh. MV2 for a little bit of low-level compression, bringing up sounds below the threshold. A little bit of imager, above 10K, below 80, making it mono and spreading it. And then Goldfoss, which was just real-time balancing of the track. And I had Recover and Tame, just a little bit of each, just to try and, just get a little bit more juice out of it. And then Clipper, just doing some very gentle clipping. And then finally the Limiter, which was doing a little bit more limiting. And together they were bringing the track up to the right level, basically. So that's how I would set up the master, and then it's just a case of listening through the track and tweaking where it needs to be tweaked, and then taking a break, coming back to it fresh ears, doing any more tweaks, and then that would be the master done. Cool. So please hit me up if you've got any questions on anything I covered today, and please, like the video if you found it useful, share it as well, send it to other people that you think would find it useful, and I'll be back definitely next Wednesday, if not before. Let me just check actually what the so next Wednesday, if not before, doing some more live streaming. And once I've got some of these tracks out of the way, then I'm going to be going back to actually starting making music on a live stream, which is massively daunting but quite exciting at the same time. So thank you everyone that's joined me today, and hopefully I'll see you again in the near future. Cheers.